Hey guys, I'm Zoltan from PHLANSMINIATURES, welcome back to the channel. This video will be about learning from our mistakes and using that knowledge to improve our miniature painting skills for the future. A couple of weeks ago, I won 2 trophies for one of my minis at a local painting competition, which is pretty awesome to be honest. I'm super proud of it. But at the same time, I also see a lot of mistakes on that mini already, stuff that I don't really want to repeat in the future. And I also did a couple of things right, a couple of things that I would want to repeat in the future. Don't get me wrong, this is probably still one of the best minis I've ever painted, but because of how I painted it, how much time I spent on it, and how it was meant for a competition, I put a little bit more thought into it, and then I also looked into it a little bit more once it was finished, looking at the pictures, looking at the model. So I just had so many takeaways that I thought a video would be a good way to learn from it, to look at both the good and the bad. This mini has a ton of very different elements. Rather than being just a dude in black armor, there are actually 2 very distinct characters here. The Black Templar and the Orc, each of them with a lot of details respectively. Incidentally, this is also the reason I chose this piece for the competition. The category was a single small miniature and I felt that this sculpt will allow me to stand out more due to its complexity. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, the green skin of the Orc, since this was probably the biggest takeaway for me when it comes to actual technique. I think overall it looks good and much better than any orc skin I had painted before, but I made some crucial mistakes and it shows. After handing in the mini for judging, the skin just kept bugging me. I was looking at the pictures I had taken and somehow it looked wrong. So I started researching painting skin on YouTube, which I should have probably done before painting, but oh well. I usually paint much more armor than skin, so I didn't have a lot of experience painting it. And what I found immediately explained why it didn't look good, because I highlighted it like armor. If you pay attention to the footage, you might notice that I did my usual thing where I highlight the parts facing the lights, but unfortunately what I did not do is connect the lights on the different muscle groups, which is apparently a typical mistake to make. Ideally, when painting skin, you should make sure that all the muscles are connected to each other so the end result looks like an organic whole and not like individual panels of armor. If you look closely at the torso of the orc, you can see that the muscles form little islands with the shadows separating them. It should be the opposite. The light should be separating the shadows, and the shadows should form the islands within the lights. When I realized this, I started painting the Hulk from Marvel Crisis Protocol to test it, and the end result looks light years better. I'll give you all the details in the Hulk video. I think it will be the perfect demonstration for what I mean, so keep an eye out for that video. Other than that, I quite like what I did here. I smoothed out the skin quite well and I added a couple of tones in the shadows. To be honest, I could have gone a bit farther with that. And it ended up as a nice and punchy counterbalance to the dark and desaturated black armor. Speaking of which, let's talk about the black armor. Choosing a model with black armor was a ballsy move since it is not exactly easy to paint black. If you make it simply black with only edge highlights, it will look boring, and while it might be okay for the tabletop, for a model that is meant for a competition, it is not really an option. Highlighting it properly, you are running the risk of making it grey rather than black, and to an extent, I feel that happened to me here, especially on the back of the model. The trick with creating a convincing black armor is to have smaller than usual but still bright highlights, because the perceived blackness of the armor comes from the brightness of the surrounding elements, not just the highlights you paint on the black, but also everything else around it. Like for example the metal elements, the cloth, the orc skin, and so forth. What happened here, I think, is that on the front side of the model there are a lot of bright elements, compared to which the armor looks quite dark, especially the metals, which are highlighted in a very similar way but have much bigger and brighter highlights. But in the back there is not much to overshadow, or more like overshine, the armor, so overall it looks brighter. In hindsight, I should have made the highlights on the back smaller than the ones on the front to compensate for it. Instead, I feel like I made them even bigger because I felt that there are not enough highlighted elements on the back. Other than that, this is still the best black armor I have painted so far, and especially in the front, it looks quite cool. The scratches I added at all the different stages of the process give it a nice worn look. If I painted it now, I would have paid more attention to integrate and smooth out the highlight zones more, and try to make the edge highlights crisper, but other than that, I still like it. Let's look at an element I quite like, the cream colored cloth. I used a method I tried out on some of my Infinity minis, and you can check it out in one of my previous videos, where I use small scratches to highlight the cloth and at the same time create a fabric-like texture. I quite like this effect, and especially by adding a bit of wear and tear to it with some dirt in the end, it looks much better than a smoothly highlighted surface. I think it works nicely with the worn look of the marine overall. I should probably use this technique more and perfect it further. Let's talk about the freehand next. I don't have much experience with freehand. I tried my hands at it once or twice, but that's about it. But here I felt like the orc needs a bit of spicing up, and to be honest, I also felt that I needed to check this box for the competition. Don't judge me. I should have probably researched it a bit before jumping in, but instead I went with a common sense approach where I started with a dark outline that I could easily paint over if I messed it up, and then highlighted it from there. Looking back, I should have taken it much slower and used magnifying glasses to be more precise. The irregularities look kinda okay on an orc, since who would expect perfectly perpendicular lines from a green skin, but in the future I would want to be a bit more precise, I think. Other than that, they serve their purpose quite well. They add more interest and variety to the mini, and they don't look too bad doing it. Another major element are the metallics. Let's talk about the steel elements first. On the one hand, I'm quite happy with these, and on the other, I am annoyed with myself because I was too eager and not patient enough to finish them properly. The steel elements on the orc ended up exactly as I wanted them at first. They needed to be brighter and shinier than the black armor, so in contrast the armor can look darker and essentially black. And I think I mostly succeeded in that regard. However, you would expect some level of disrepair from an orc, plus I wanted more visual interest again, so I went with the rust effects. The problem is, in particular with the ones on the power claw, that I rushed these a bit and I didn't integrate them well enough. Also, instead of working them in from the start, first I completed the steel and then added these as an afterthought. The end result looks a bit too artificial and regular, plus it doesn't really fit into the rest of the surface organically. So in retrospect, I should have either had these in mind from the start or spent way more time working on it and integrating them into the claw. Writing this script, I have to realize that I have a tendency to go almost all the way with something only to rush it in the end and not realize its full potential. Note to myself, stop doing that. On the other hand, I quite like what I did with the swords. The process was almost identical to the blades of the power claw, but I finished it off with some green, red and yellow reflections from the skin, the blood and the lamp respectively. I still think it's a nice touch. Then again, it could look even better if I put a little bit more time and care into it, so I guess the point about the patience thing still stands. As far as the gold goes, I think I messed it up plain and simple. It turned out to be way too desaturated, and once again, if I took the time and fixed it by glazing back some of the midtones, it could have looked way better and punchier. Looking at the footage, I actually spotted the point where I started overdoing it, and instead of adding only a couple of small sparkles, I covered the midtones with too much white. Should be easy to fix, but I keep doing it anyway. I'll learn to not do it eventually. The OSL effect, specifically the glow of the lamp, is another thing that I kinda did half-heartedly on this piece. I really wanted to have an OSL effect because I wanted to check another box for the competition, yes, once again, just like with the freehand, but also because I thought it would be cool to have it reflected on the sword. And it works kind of nice on the sword, but it is barely noticeable on the rest of the mini, which is probably a good thing since I basically left it half finished. I started applying it on the cloth and the surrounding areas, but then started working on some other elements, and I ended up never going back and even covering up some of the work I did with later corrections to those areas. So the object source lighting is there and not there at the same time. I guess I could say that I wanted it to be subtle, but if I'm honest, I just never finished it. Okay, let's finish with something I really like, the face of the Marine. This is probably the best face I've painted on a mini so far. It has nice details and tones, and it conveys the emotions that I wanted to show on him. I used all the tricks I know on this one, including lots of different colored glazes to make it look more alive and to make the highlights pop without making it desaturated. But most importantly, I used magnifying glasses and really took my time going back multiple times to fix small mistakes and imperfections. It might be funny, but the face is probably my favorite part on this project. Alright, let's finish on that positive note. As a painter, it is easy to be discouraged by all the amazing art out there, and especially if you are trying to improve and making progress, it is likely that you always find your older paint jobs to be lacking and in general not up to your current standards. As you can see, there is very little on this model that I find satisfactory barely more than a month after I finished it, but at the same time this mini won the local competition in Prague and was the best model I had painted when I painted it. Granted, a local competition is not even close to the same as winning a Golden Demon, but you have to start somewhere, right? So I guess the biggest takeaway, aside from the need to be a bit more patient with my process, is that it's nice to look at all the mistakes, trying to fix them and make sure that you don't commit them again. However, it's also really good to just appreciate how far you have come and what you actually do right. Because, for example, for me, I started painting around 3 years ago, and if 3 years ago you have told me that I can win something at a painting competition, I would have probably laughed. And here we are. I hope you guys found some inspiration in this video. Let me know if you agree with my assessments. Did you find something else that I didn't notice, or do you disagree with some of the points that I made? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you don't miss any of the future content. Happy painting and see you in the next one.